When the Legends Die, Chapter 37. The night show was getting underway. He got his gear and made his way out to the chutes. The bull riding was going on. Bull riding left him cold. Brahma bulls were mean buckers, but the rider had a certain single to hold on to. Even at that, bull riding was at least half a matter of luck, and the cowboy on the surcingle made the whole thing seem absurd to him. He began checking his gear, cinches, stirrups, rein, boots, and chaps. The bull riding clamored and clanked to a conclusion. The announcer made his spiel, and the trick riding started. The girls who did the trick riding might just as well have been Broadway showgirls, except they had learned to ride a horse and do stunts on a special saddle. He had seen all their stunts, and he knew all their faces, whether he had ever seen them before or not. Finally, the last of the girls left the arena, and the bronc riding was the next event. The broncs were in the chutes. Riders and the helpers were saddling them in a babel of talk, laughter, and good-natured curses. Tom had drawn tonight's number 3 ride, 2 others ahead of him. He always took his time about saddling, not liking to wait too long before he rode. He went over to chute number 3 as the number 1 rider was announced. A helper was there, holding the big roan's head. Tom stepped up into the chute runway, saddle in hand, and let it down easily, cinches dangling. The roan flinched, but didn't even try to hunch its back, saving its strength. Some broncs tried to fight the saddle, others saved their fight for the rider. The helper reached between the chute's planks with the wire and fished for the front cinch, got it, handed it to Tom. He snugged the front cinch while the helper fished for the other ring on the back cinch. Tom took it, jerked the back cinch tight to force the roan to let out its breath. It wheezed, eased for an instant, and Tom hauled up the front cinch a couple of notches before the roan could catch another breath. Then he let off on the back cinch, kept it just tight enough so the saddle wouldn't rock. The crowd was roaring. The number 1 rider, a newcomer who had made a spectacular ride last night, apparently was doing all right for himself again. Tom didn't even look up, but he could hear the stomp of the bronc's hoofs and the grunting wheezes, the slap of the rider's chaps. Then the horn blew, and the crowd cheered and whistled. Tom glanced up then and saw the rider pivot off the pickup man's horse, grin at the crowd, and wave his hat. Then he unbuckled his chaps, stepped out, slapped the chaps over his arm, and came back toward the chutes, almost strutting. He was good, and he knew it, a boy on his way up. The pickup men chivied the bronc toward the exit, and the announcer started his spiel about the number 2 rider. Tom shook his saddle and tested it, and took up the front cinch another notch. He resined his chaps, remembering when he was a boy on his way up, when the crowds cheered and whistled and stomped for him, when he was riding for points, a long time ago. He checked his spurs, dried his hands on his shirt, and got ready to ease himself down into the saddle. The gate opened at number 2 chute, and out went a hammer-headed black with a rider in a yellow shirt. The crowd began to roar. Tom let himself down into the saddle, and the roan didn't even hump its back. He felt for the stirrups, felt the hard curve of the metal through the thin soles of his boots. He sensed the taut muscles of the bronc beneath his calves, hard, tense, ready to explode into action. He dried his hands again and glanced at the number 2 rider. The hammer-headed black was ducking and side-jumping, and the rider had too short a rein and couldn't seem to slip it. A helper laid the bucking strap across Tom's horse's back, fished the buckle, and fastened it loosely, ready to jerk tight. He handed up the rein on the left side. No, Tom snapped the other side. I forgot. The helper apologized and brought the rein around for Tom's unorthodox right hand. The crowd groaned. The number 2 rider was in trouble. His short rein had jerked him loose in the saddle. The bronc knew it, lunged viciously, side-jumped, and the rider was thrown. The pickup men closed in, drove the bronc towards the exit, and the unlucky rider slowly got to his feet, shaking his head. He dusted himself and walked unhappily back toward the chutes. The announcer was bellowing, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, here comes a rider you all know, at least by reputation. Some call him the Killer, some call him Black Death. He has a whole string of names like that, and he's earned every one of them." The crowd was beginning to cheer. The announcer went on for the cheers to ease off, then went on. "I don't have to tell you any more about him, I see. Anyway, here he is, coming out of chute number 3. I give you Tom Black on Skyrocket." The crowd roared again, louder than before, then tensed into silence. Tom got the signal. The bucking strap was jerked tight around the roan's flanks. Tom set his spurs well forward, leaned back against the rein, took a deep breath, and let it out. He nodded to the gatemen, and the gates swung open. The roan, called Skyrocket, went out with a lunge and a bellow. Rein taut, spurs raking, Tom Black began his ride. He had made that ride 1,000 times. Skyrocket was a pattern bucker. 3 lunges, a side jump, a half spin, and then 3 lunges again. Tom rode with the rhythm, concentrating on punishment with his spurs and being brutal with the rein at every side jump and spin. 3 times the roan followed the pattern: lunge, 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 side jump, spin. Then the punishment made it frantic. It tried to duck left, shaking its head, bellowing. Tom hauled its head around, and it lunged again. Then tried to duck again. Tom shifted his weight for leverage, and a stab of pain shot through his right knee and streaked to his ankle. In fury at the pain, Tom jerked the bronc's head up and around by sheer strength. The ankle went numb, and to keep from losing the stirrup, he jabbed his foot deeper. The roan squealed and came up, pawing the air. It reared, danced, still trying to spin left, and again he jerked its head around to the right. Neck bowed, it came down fighting, bunched for another lunge. His right leg now was numb from knee to ankle. Tom was jerked forward as the roan struck the ground head down. It lunged, and he powered its head around as it left the ground. Off balance, it seemed to dangle its feet in the air. Tom felt it begin to fall, still fighting for its feet. He knew it was going, knew he had to get clear. He kicked his left foot free of the stirrup, but his right foot didn't respond. He grabbed the pommel of the saddle with his left hand, tried to thrust himself clear, but he was still in the saddle as the roan came down with a crash on its right side, rolling with its own momentum. Tom felt one crushing blow across his hips before his head struck the arena. Then the whole world seemed to explode in a burst of light and pain. Then darkness. Nothing. He had a brief span of semi-consciousness before they moved him, enough to know the sensation of floating in a choppy sea of pain and hear voices all around him. His head was a throbbing balloon, and his vision was blurred. Spasms of nausea wrenched at him. Then they gave him injections, and the sea of pain began to quiet, even the pain in his chest that almost stopped his breathing. Then he was unconscious again. He never knew how they got him on the stretcher, put the stretcher in the ambulance, took him to the hospital. He never knew how thin was his thread of life for a night and a day and another night.